At my sister's baby shower, everyone laughed behind my back, said I'd never understand what real family means. I left without saying a word. 2 weeks later, they got an eviction notice and realized who'd been covering the bills all along. I, 32M, stood in the corner of the backyard, holding a plate of untouched finger sandwiches, watching my sister's baby shower unfold like a scene from someone else's life. Pink and blue balloons swayed in the afternoon breeze, and the women clustered around her laughed at something I couldn't hear. My sister glowed in that way pregnant women do, one hand resting on her belly, the other gesturing wildly as she told some story. I'd arrived early that morning to help set up. Strung the lights across the pergola, arranged the chairs, carried the heavy coolers from the garage. No one thanked me, but I didn't expect them to. That's just how it was in our family. I did things, and they happened, and life moved on. The comment came from my aunt, the one who'd always had opinions about everything. She was talking to my mother near the dessert table, not bothering to lower her voice. She said something about how I wouldn't understand what real family meant, not like my sister who was about to have her third child. My mother laughed, that particular laugh she reserved for when she agreed with something but didn't want to say it outright. Then my cousin chimed in, saying something about how some people were just meant to be on the sidelines, watching real life happen to others. They weren't whispering. They wanted me to hear. I felt something cold settle in my chest, not anger exactly, but something worse. Recognition. This wasn't new. This was just the first time they'd said it out loud where I could hear them. I looked down at my plate, at the sad little sandwiches with their crusts cut off, and decided I was done. I walked to my car without saying goodbye. No one noticed. They were too busy cooing over onesies and debating baby names. My phone stayed silent the entire drive home. The thing about being invisible is that people forget what you actually do. They see you as furniture, as wallpaper, as something that's just there. They don't ask questions about how things work. They just expect them to work. My sister and her husband lived in a nice house in a decent neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a yard for the kids, close to good schools. They'd moved in 4 years ago, right after their wedding, gushing about how they'd finally found their forever home. My brother-in-law worked in sales, the kind of job with big commissions when things went well and dry spells when they didn't. My sister stayed home with the kids. It was tight, they always said. Money was tight, but they managed. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been the one managing it for them. It started small. 6 months after they moved in, my sister called me crying. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage and facing foreclosure. Her husband's commissions had tanked, and they'd burned through their savings. She begged me not to tell our parents, said it would kill them to know their golden daughter was failing. So I paid it. I called the bank, set up a payment plan, and covered what they owed. $12,000. She promised to pay me back. She never did. Then it was the car payment. Then the credit cards. Then the utilities. Each time, there was a crisis, tears, promises. Each time, I fixed it. I had the money. I worked in tech, made good money, lived alone in a small apartment because I didn't need much. I could afford to help family. That's what you did, right? But I wasn't stupid. I kept records. Every transfer, every payment, every bill I covered. I had a spreadsheet that went back 4 years. The total was sitting at just over $200,000. 2 days after the baby shower, I opened my laptop and started making changes. The mortgage was in their name, but I'd set up automatic payments from my account 3 years ago when they'd nearly lost the house again. I canceled it. The car payments, both of them, were linked to my credit card. Canceled. The life insurance policy I'd been paying to make sure the kids would be okay if something happened, the one they didn't even know existed. Canceled. The private preschool tuition for their oldest, the one in the nice Montessori school my sister bragged about. Canceled. I went through everything methodically, like debugging code. Every recurring payment, every automatic transfer. Click, click, click. Gone. Then I drafted an email to my sister. I kept it simple, attached the spreadsheet with every payment itemized by date and amount, and explained that I was no longer able to provide financial assistance. I mentioned that I'd covered their mortgage for 37 months, their car payments for 48 months, and various other expenses totaling $204,000. I wished her well with the new baby and said I hoped they'd be able to work things out. I didn't ask for the money back. I just wanted them to know. I sent it at midnight on a Tuesday and turned off my phone. When I finally turned it back on Thursday morning, I had 63 missed calls and over 100 text messages. I scrolled through them with my coffee, not reading them in detail, just getting the general theme. Confusion, anger, panic, more anger, then desperate pleading. My sister's first message asked if the email was a joke. Her second message, sent 4 hours later, said their mortgage payment had bounced and the bank was demanding immediate payment plus fees. Her third message, 6 hours after that, was all caps asking what I'd done. The messages devolved from there. My mother called me cruel and selfish. My father said I was tearing the family apart. My brother-in-law sent a string of messages calling me every name he could think of, then switched to begging, then back to insults. My aunt, the one who'd made the comment about real family, sent a long message about Christian charity and forgiveness that would have been more meaningful if she'd ever actually been Christian. I responded to none of them. The eviction notice came 2 weeks later. My sister posted about it on Facebook, some vague message about hard times and asking for prayers. The comments were full of supportive messages from people who had no idea what was actually happening. My mother called it a tragedy. My father started a GoFundMe that raised $800. That's when my sister showed up at my apartment. I buzzed her up because I knew this conversation was coming eventually. She looked terrible, puffy-faced and exhausted, her pregnant belly seeming to weigh her down. She stood in my doorway and asked if we could talk. I let her in. She sat on my couch and started crying immediately, asking me how I could do this to her, to the kids. Didn't I care about my own family? She said she was pregnant and stressed and couldn't believe I'd chosen now, of all times, to pull my support. She said she'd always thought I was the good one, the reliable one, the one who actually cared. I let her finish. Then I asked her if she remembered the baby shower. She looked confused, said of course she remembered, it was 2 weeks ago. I asked her if she remembered what our aunt said. She got defensive, said she didn't hear everything people said. It was her party, she was busy. I told her exactly what was said, word for word. I asked her if she'd noticed I left. She admitted she hadn't. Then I asked her a different question. I asked her if she knew how much money I'd given them over the years. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said she knew I'd helped sometimes, when things were tight, but she didn't know I kept track. Her voice had an edge to it, like I was the one being unreasonable. I told her the number. $204,000. I watched her face go pale. She tried to say it couldn't be that much, but her voice was weak. I offered to show her the spreadsheet. She didn't want to see it. She asked me why I never said anything, why I just kept giving. I told her I thought I was helping family. I thought that's what you did. But then I realized something at her baby shower. I realized I wasn't actually family to them. I was a resource, a silent ATM machine that dispensed money and required no maintenance. She started crying harder, saying that wasn't true. They loved me. I was her brother. I asked her when she'd last called me for anything other than money. When she'd last invited me to something that wasn't a crisis or an obligation. When she'd last asked how I was doing. She couldn't answer. I told her I wasn't asking for the money back. It was a gift, all of it, given freely because I loved them. But the gifts were done now. From now on, they'd have to figure things out themselves, the way everyone else did. The way I'd had to figure things out when I was starting my career and had no one to fall back on. She asked me what they were supposed to do. They were going to lose the house. The kids would have nowhere to go. I suggested they talk to our parents, maybe move in with them for a while. Or her husband could pick up a second job. Or they could downsize to something affordable. There were options. They just weren't easy options. But that's what real family did, right? They figured it out together. She left without saying goodbye. The next few weeks were quiet. My phone stopped ringing. The text messages slowed to a trickle, then stopped entirely. I saw a Facebook post from my mother about supporting family through hard times, clearly directed at me, and I ignored them. My sister's GoFundMe stalled out at $3,000. They lost the house. I heard through a cousin who still talked to me that they'd moved in with our parents. The house was crowded now, tense. My brother-in-law had taken a second job doing overnight warehouse work. My sister was stressed about the pregnancy. The kids were acting out. Everyone was miserable, and everyone blamed me. Update 1. 3 months passed before my father reached out. Not a text, not a call, but an actual letter in the mail. He wrote that he'd been thinking a lot about everything that happened and wanted to understand my side. He asked if I'd meet him for coffee. I almost didn't go, but he was my father, and despite everything, I wanted to believe he was different from the rest of them. We met at a diner halfway between his house and my apartment. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. He ordered coffee, and asked me how I'd been. I said I'd been fine. He nodded like he expected that answer. Then he got to the point. He said he'd talked to my sister, really talked to her, and she'd finally told him everything. The full extent of what I'd been covering. He'd had no idea. My mother didn't either. My sister had kept it from them because she was embarrassed. He apologized. Not for my sister, but for himself. He said he'd failed me as a father because he'd never noticed how much I'd been carrying. He'd let me be invisible because it was easier than acknowledging I might need something too. I appreciated the apology, but I told him it didn't change anything. The damage was done. I'd spent 4 years being useful instead of being family, and I was done with it. He asked what it would take for me to forgive them. I said I didn't know if I wanted to. Forgiveness felt like another thing they wanted from me, another resource to extract. What I wanted was for them to leave me alone and figure their own lives out. He accepted that. He said he understood, even if it hurt. Then he told me something I didn't expect. He said my sister's husband had left. The stress of everything, the money problems, the move, the new baby coming, it had been too much. He'd walked out 2 weeks ago, said he couldn't do it anymore. My sister was living with our parents with 2 kids and another on the way, working part-time remotely while heavily pregnant, trying to figure out how to survive as a single mother. My father didn't say it like he was asking me to help. He just said it like he thought I should know. I didn't feel the guilt I think he expected me to feel. I felt nothing. Maybe that made me a bad person. I didn't know anymore. Before he left, he told me the family was planning a dinner for my sister to support her through the separation. He said I was invited if I wanted to come, but he'd understand if I didn't. Then he paid for both our coffees and left. I didn't go to the dinner. Update 2. The baby came in November. A girl. I found out from Facebook like everyone else. The pictures showed my sister looking exhausted but happy, my mother holding the baby, my father in the background looking proud. My older niece and nephew crowded around, curious about their new sister. It looked like a family. I felt nothing looking at those pictures. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I was supposed to feel something, some pull of blood and obligation. But I'd spent 4 years feeling everything for them, and I had nothing left. My mother sent me a text with a picture of the baby and said she was beautiful. Didn't I want to meet my niece? I responded that I was glad everyone was healthy. She asked when I'd come visit. I said I didn't know. She didn't push. December came. Then January. My sister sent me a friend request on LinkedIn, which felt so absurd I almost laughed. I ignored it. Then she sent an email, not to my personal account, but to my work email, which meant she'd looked up where I worked. The email was long and rambling, written clearly in the middle of the night while dealing with a newborn. She apologized for everything. She said she'd been selfish and entitled and had taken me for granted. She said she understood why I'd cut them off and didn't blame me. She said she was trying to do better, to be better, and she hoped one day I might be able to forgive her. Then, at the end, she asked if I might be willing to meet the baby. Not at our parents' house, but somewhere neutral. She said she wanted her daughter to know her uncle, if I was willing. I sat with that email for 3 days before responding. I told her I'd think about it. 2 weeks later, I met her at a park. It was cold but clear, and she'd bundled the baby in so many layers she looked like a tiny marshmallow. My sister looked different. Thinner, harder, like life had filed away all the soft edges. She thanked me for coming. We walked for a while without talking. Then she asked if I wanted to hold the baby. I did, carefully, this tiny person who had no idea about any of the history between us. She was warm and solid in my arms, real in a way nothing else had felt in months. My sister told me about her life now. She was living with our parents still, working full-time remotely, splitting childcare with our mother. Her ex-husband sent money sometimes, but was mostly absent. It was hard, really hard, but she was managing. She'd had to learn how to manage because there was no other option. She said she understood now what I'd been trying to tell her. About being invisible. About being taken for granted. She said she thought about that conversation we'd had in my apartment all the time, especially at 3 in the morning when the baby was screaming and she was alone and exhausted. She said she got it now. I asked her what she wanted from me. Not in an accusatory way, just genuinely. I needed to know if this was real or if this was another angle. She said she didn't want anything. She just wanted me to know she was sorry, and she understood if I never wanted to see any of them again. But she hoped I wouldn't disappear entirely. She said her kids asked about me sometimes, the older ones, asking where their uncle went. She tried to explain in terms they could understand, but it was hard. I told her I'd think about it. She said that was fair. I gave the baby back and went home. I didn't make any promises. Update 3. It's been 8 months since the baby shower. I'm writing this because people keep asking for updates, and because I think I've finally figured out how I feel about everything. I see my nieces and nephew once a month now. Not at family gatherings, just one-on-one time with them. I take them to museums, to the park, out for ice cream. I'm trying to build relationships with them that aren't based on money or obligation, but on actually knowing them as people. They're good kids. They didn't ask for any of this. I don't see my sister outside of dropping off and picking up the kids. We're cordial, but not close. Maybe we'll never be close again. I'm okay with that. I haven't been to my parents' house since before the baby shower. My mother keeps inviting me to things, and I keep declining. My father seems to understand better. He meets me for coffee sometimes, just the two of us, and we talk about normal things. Work, sports, the weather. It's not deep, but it's honest. The rest of the family doesn't contact me anymore. The silence is a relief. I'm not the villain in their story anymore, but I'm not the hero either. I'm just someone who set a boundary and stuck to it. Some days that feels like enough. Other days it feels like I blew up my entire family over pride. But then I remember that conversation at the baby shower, the casual cruelty of it, and I know I made the right choice. Money doesn't make you family. Showing up doesn't make you family. Being there for the good times doesn't make you family. What makes you family is seeing someone, really seeing them, and choosing to value them anyway. Not for what they can do for you, but for who they are. I spent 4 years being useful. Now I'm just trying to be human. My sister sent me a text last week. She'd saved enough to move into her own apartment, something small, but theirs. The kids would have their own rooms. She was proud of herself, she said. She'd done it on her own. I told her congratulations. I meant it. She asked if I wanted to see the place once they'd moved in. Maybe have dinner, nothing fancy, just her and the kids. No parents. No extended family. No expectations. I said yes. I don't know what happens next. Maybe we rebuild something. Maybe we don't. But for the first time in 4 years, when I think about my family, I don't feel empty. I don't feel angry either. I just feel like maybe, eventually, there might be something real there. That's enough for now. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.